Welcome to Off the Green. We are your hosts. I'm Anthony Bruno, and he's Wade McFarlane.
In 2004, Michael McEwan joined Bunkered, Scotland's most popular golf magazine. Today, he is an accomplished author, journalist, and one of the UK's most trusted voices in golf.
We sat down with Michael to talk about the controversial Swilcan Bridge Patio and also made some predictions ahead of the Phoenix Open and the Super Bowl. So we hope you enjoy our conversation with Michael McEwan.
Michael, thanks so much for joining us from Glasgow today. We really appreciate the time. We're going to start things off with the icebreaker question, as we always do. My girlfriend's family is from Scotland, so we have at least one bottle of whiskey in the cupboard here. I want to know what is your favorite whiskey region, and if you even want to go further than that, what's your favorite distillery in Scotland?
Oh, what a great question straight off the bat. So first things first, I should say I'm not a huge whiskey drinker, which I know is crazy being from Scotland. But if I had to pick anywhere, Islay, the Isle of Islay, which is just off the west coast of Scotland. So it's a tiny little island. There's a great golf course there called the Macrae, which is world class. If it was on mainland Scotland, you'd think, yeah, that could host major championships. It's that good. But all around the island, there's lots of whiskey distilleries. It's a beautiful little place. I think there's about 8 distilleries in the island. So if I was going there, I was going to tell anyone, go somewhere looking for whiskey in Scotland, that's the place. But my favourite one, so I actually grew up in a different island all the way up in the very north of Scotland, an island called Orkney. And we have a distillery there, it's quite famous, called Highland Park. So if there's a special occasion or a celebration, I would open the Highland Park. But if I was going somewhere, I'd probably go to Islay. Either way, I'm getting on a boat. So
yeah, right on. See, Islay for me is very peaty, right? Like I find when I'm drinking an Islay whiskey, it's like I'm drinking a campfire. It's a little too much for me. Like I prefer Highland whiskeys because Islas are pretty strong. Like I feel like you need to work up to them. But Highland Park, okay, I'm gonna write that one down for sure.
Highly recommended. Yeah, it's a little bit peaty as well. I mean, not quite as much as say a 16-year-old Jura, for example, but it'll get the job done. That's for sure.
We were talking a little bit before we came on, guys, and I am still very jealous that I'm the only one that hasn't been to Scotland of the three of us. So at some point, I'm going to make my way out there. I'm going to drink some whiskey, and it's going to be great.
Yeah.
All right, Michael.
It's a nice place. It's a nice place. It has its moments. It can be cold. It can be wet, but when you look at all the things that we've got, all the great golf courses, all the history, and you think of all the things that Scotland's given to the world, TV, radio, X-ray, Tarnick Adam, all that sort of stuff. It's pretty neat to be able to say that you're from this cool little place.
One day I'm going to check it out. Michael, what's your first memory of playing golf, and what would you say is your greatest golf inspiration?
Wow, my very first memory of playing golf. So again, I'm going back to Orkney. And I would have been about 4 or 5, I think. And I'm not from a particularly sporty family, and by any stretch of the imagination, I was kind of the black sheep. My older brother's into music, my dad's into poetry and writing, my sister was into boys. I was the kind of the surprise package that was just really into all sports. And there was, where we stayed in Kirkwall, which is the main town in Orkney, our house backed onto this big playing field that during the summer was converted into a sort of 18-hole putting green. And it was like 20 pence, and you could hire your putter and I think it was Max Fly golf balls back at that point. I mean, it was like being given a stone, effectively. There's a wrong.
You know what? I still think I have a couple Max Fly golf balls lying around somewhere. How do you bring that up?
The collector's items, aren't they? I mean, they were individually wrapped. I remember that much. But I remember playing there pretty much all day, every day throughout the summer. It was great fun. I knew the couple that ran it on behalf of the council. I got to know them really well. So after I'd paid for a couple of rounds, like 40 pence, which is, a couple of dimes in the States and Canada, I was then getting to play for free all the time. So the club was way too long for me. I remember that much. I was a short kid, and the putter sort of went up through my shoulder out there. But I loved it. It was so much fun. And yeah, I was kind of hooked from then on. And I guess in terms of inspiration, it's so hard to say, but if you're talking about someone who's inspiring you to pay attention to golf and, you know, give it your time of day, then my dad would get that, because I vividly remember about 1995. So I was 11 years old. Maybe it was 94. Either way, I was 10, 11 years old. And my dad every year would watch the Masters. Like I say, not a sporty family, but the Masters, he would always watch that because he was obsessed with Augusta. And I remember him sitting me down. I was running about, and he said, you know, come and sit down, watch this. There's this young player here who's going to be big in golf. And I said, all right, so who? And he's like, it's a guy called Tiger Woods. And it just, that's a funny name. Yeah, okay, I'll watch. And yeah, who'd have thought that I'd be at Augusta, you know, several years later, covering his 15th major win and first major in 11 years. So it's been quite a ride from this really small island with a community putting green to finally getting to walk the hallowed turf of Augusta National. But it's been fun.
That's amazing. And you mentioned that you got to cover it. And you've always had this passion, right, for covering sport and being a journalist in sport. Like that started for you from a really young age. Like, where does that passion sort of come from? Does it come from your family? Is it something that you kind of just picked up along the way?
Yeah, a little bit of both, really. You know, my dad was part of the folk scene in the west of Scotland, so he was good friends with Billy Connolly. Many years ago, my dad wrote one of Billy's songs, and I think that's where the writing side of it comes from. But when it came to sport and writing about sport specifically, I think I drew a little bit of those influences, and then I had this, as I say, quite unique to my family's interest in sport. And when you married the two together, I became this strange kid amongst my friends. They would all try and we'd watch football matches. They would try and recreate the goals and the celebrations. I'd watch the football match, and then I'd go and get my dad had this Apple Mac 2. It's a really old-fashioned box thing, and I would try to write match reports about them. So at that point, I think I knew, right, I'm slightly different here. I used to make my own football magazines out of paper and cutting images out of other magazines and newspapers. It was just this, I think, just this inbuilt passion that you don't really know where it comes from, but it's there, and there are just maybe one or two threads that pull it out. So I was quite lucky in that sense. But I can honestly say that, you know, writing about sport, writing about golf, football, whatever, it's all that I've ever wanted to do. So, you know, I've been very lucky to sort of realize an ambition, as cheesy as that sounds.
I see where you're coming from, because when I was young, 8, 9 years old, I was the guy who was sitting in the car with my dad, and instead of listening to music, I wanted to listen to sports talk radio. And now all these years later, I work in sports media. So I was the weird one back then. All my friends knew everything about music and who the hottest artists were at the time. And I didn't know anything because I was just listening to sports talk all the time. But it just reminded me of my story growing up and getting into sports media. And just to stay on that for a second, Michael, when you started your journey in sports journalism, was the goal always to write specifically about golf, or was it to write about other sports as well?
I was a wide-eyed kid that had ambitions of being, you know, the number one soccer writer in the country. You know, that was my dream, because football, I'm not going to lie, football was my number one love when I was little. And it would be disingenuous of me to say that it's still not now. You know, I'll pay to go and watch football matches. I'll follow my team here, there, everywhere. I don't know if I would necessarily do that about golf if I wasn't covering it. But yeah, I wanted to write about football specifically, and writing about golf was just meant to be a stepping stone. It helped that I was passionate about it. It helped that I liked it, I understood it, that I was familiar with, you know, golfing language, if you like. So it was a fairly easy thing to segue into. But yeah, I only ever intended to stay writing about golf, really, where I was for 2 years. And let me see, April the 1st will be 19 years of doing it, which seems crazy when you think about it, but it's gone by in a flash. But I love it. And you know, it's a horrible cliche, and you know, as a journalist, you're sort of predisposed to try and avoid them. But I think it rings true. You know, if you love what you do, you're never going to work a day in your life. So I feel very fortunate that I get to work in such a fun space. Yeah, there are times that, you know, some days are tougher than others, and deadlines can be a bit stressful, and let's face it, you're not writing about Tiger Woods winning majors every single day of the week, right? There are times that you have to compromise and write some stuff you'd rather not be writing. But on the whole, what would I rather be doing? Would I rather be writing about sport, or would I be rather doing something like chipping away in a coal mine? I know exactly what I'd rather be doing. So
yeah, it's an obvious choice, right? Like, do you think that all of those days where you're not writing about Tiger Woods winning a major, like, does it all make it worth it when you do get to write about something like that, right? Like when you do get to experience Augusta, you do get, not even necessarily Augusta, but any big event that you get to cover, and you're like, I can't believe I'm doing this for a living.
Totally. I think, the first time you do these things, especially, it's pinch yourself stuff, and you have to work very hard. And even now at the age of 38, 39, you still have to work hard at trying to maintain that professionalism, if you like. I remember the first time I went to Augusta was 2019, for Tiger's win. And I deliberately got there. I flew out from the UK on the Sunday. I got there bright and early on the Monday morning because I wanted to get the wow factor out of my system. Just spend a whole day walking the premises, going to the shop, seeing it, tasting everything that was on the menu. I just wanted to have that day of being totally awestruck by it, so that then the rest of the week, I could get on with the job effectively. And it was like that the first time I went to Ryder Cup. Maybe less so the Open, because it's always been on the doorstep. But yeah, certainly to your point that when you get to go to these places, that's why you get into doing this job, because you do want to report on those, the biggest moments, the biggest people, the biggest occasions in the sport. And no doubt, if you did that every day, it's not going to be as special, is it? It's like Christmas. I'm huge in Christmas. We put the tree up on the 1st of December every year. I've got a little girl now who's 5 years old. She is very, very into Christmas at the moment. So the most recent Christmas was just wild, but you couldn't do it every day. So I think it's the fact that it's a novelty, that it is a rare occurrence, and the fact that you do have to put up with some less exciting bits in between. That's what makes it so special when those days do finally come around.
Yeah, I totally agree, right? And then for both of us working in media too, I think both of us have had those experiences where we're just like, wow, can you believe you're actually doing this for a living? It's just, it's incredible. And it is important to remember that, like, not every day is going to be like that, but when it is, to really kind of embrace it and cherish it. So I love that you guys kind of took that day at Augusta and you were like, yeah, let's just, for one day, I'm just going to be a spectator and go and enjoy it.
Well, you've got to, because I think that's the best way you can provide context as well. You can't just go and show up and sit in a media center and write about something and expect people to read what you say and feel something. You've got to, whatever content it is that you're making, whether it's a podcast, a vlog, an essay, a book, a tweet, even, you've got to be able to provide that little bit of humanity and context and color. And you can only get that by experiencing things the way that the reader would experience it. You've got to put yourself in their shoes first and foremost, and then work backwards to say, right, this is what it's like, and now here's the story behind it. So you've got to indulge it a little bit. People think it's a little bit self-indulgent. There are people who think you shouldn't take a credential and use it that way. I totally disagree. As long as you don't spend, the whole week, inside the ropes following somebody that you don't need to be inside the ropes following, then I think it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, 100% agree. Michael, I want to talk about your golf game a little bit. So in 2018, you wrote an article about how you have kind of accepted being another rubbish golfer, right?
Yep.
Have you always accepted that, or is that something that you've recently come to accept?
I recently have come to accept it. So I became a dad in 2017, and it's like everyone says, it changes your perspective on things. And prior to that, I don't know if it's, that sort of looking for something that's missing in your life, and then you suddenly realize, oh, okay, it's being a parent, and that changes things, or whether it was something else completely. But I feel like I'm a lot more patient now than I used to be, and a lot more accepting of things that are out with my control. My wife hears me say it all the time, it's about controlling the controllables. Now, yes, I could become a better golfer if I wanted to. I think the problem is that I actually don't want to. I'm very content with just enjoying the game on my terms and, playing the way that I do. Some people find that strange. I've got colleagues that are like, why not go for more lessons? Why not get a handicap and try and bring it down. I'm like, no, that's not what I look for from golf. You know, I enjoy the opportunity to escape, to stay physically fit, to stay mentally fit, to just kind of indulge myself in a bit of me time. And certainly prior to becoming a dad, when I didn't have that kind of perspective, I would get very annoyed at myself, you know, in a way that I had absolutely no right to get annoyed at myself, you know. And then it was a sort of light bulb moment that, you know what, you suck at this game. Why are you so upset about it? You don't practice, you don't put in the time, and you're certainly not giving it 100% focus and commitment. So why are you upset that you're not stiffing it to like a foot or 2 feet from 250 yards out with a 3-wood off the deck out of a, you know, a bit of a crap lie? That shot you hit is exactly the kind of shot that you should hit. So accept it. And ever since that, and you know, sort of that's resetting of my perspective and my own ambitions as far as golf goes, I've enjoyed it so much more. It's a bit weird, you know, I'm probably playing worse than I did. I'm playing certainly less frequently than I used to, but I enjoy it now way more than I ever did. So I think you just kind of have to figure out for yourself what your own personal aspirations are, what you want to get from the game, and kind of just exist within that little bubble and enjoy it to the fullest after that.
I know exactly where you're coming from, Michael, because I feel like I've gotten worse and worse at golf as I've gotten older. And I think it's the exact same thing. It's like, I don't practice, I don't take lessons, I don't take the game nearly as seriously as good golfers do. So why the heck, as you said, why would you expect to like flush a 7-iron from 175 and put it within 8 feet and then make the birdie putt? Like, I'm going to do that maybe like once a round, once every like 2 rounds if I'm lucky. So I've come to terms with that as well. So I know exactly where you're coming from when you talk about
But
that.
do you enjoy it more though, Bruno? That's the key, right? Like I think I have come to that expectation as well, like Michael was saying, but it's learning to enjoy it for different reasons, right? Because for me, for a long time, it's the better you play, the more enjoyable it is. But Michael's saying the opposite, which I find is fascinating.
Yeah, no, I see what he's saying. It's like when you care less, you just enjoy it more. Like take away the expectations, go out there, have a good time, escape from everything, just enjoy your round of golf for the day, and you'll just have a better time. And I honestly I completely agree. But Michael, you've been with Bunkered now since 2017. And I know you talked about covering
2004, actually. 2004.
Oh, since 2004.
Oh, 2004. Wow.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah.
Our bad on that. But I know you talked about covering Tiger at Augusta. That obviously must have been huge. If you had to pick one highlight since you started in this role, what do you think it would be? Like the number one thing. And if it's not Tiger winning the Masters for his 15th major, what would it be?
That is such a good question. You know, it's funny, it's not really something I've spent a huge amount of time thinking about either. Tiger winning the Masters has to be right up there. You know, your first Masters, and that happens. You know, it was so special. It was exactly why. And I remember thinking it on my way back to the horrendous Motel 6 that I was staying in. I remember thinking on the drive back there, like, I can't believe that's just happened. That is exactly why I started doing this job. So that's probably the most special. One of the most memorable, I wouldn't necessarily say it was the most special, but one of the most memorable was I played 9 holes with Donald Trump pre-presidency at his golf course in Aberdeen. He'd come over to do a few bits and pieces and sort of schmooze some media figures. And so I had dinner with him and his family at the resort the night before. And then we played 9 holes together the next day. And that was surreal, you know. Certainly now looking back on it, considering everything that's happened in the last 10 years, especially so, but even at the time, before all the politics and all that sort of stuff, it's just this figure that you've always known, you know, even over here in the UK, you always knew who Donald Trump was. Even, I remember watching Gremlins 2, the new batch, and I knew that it was a parody of Donald Trump, you know, that character. He just has this presence. He's a big guy as well, you know, he's tall and broad. So you just have you just know that you're in the company of someone who's just got this aura. So that was definitely memorable. But yeah, I mean, as I suppose the time I interviewed Arnold Palmer as well, it was just over the phone. Unfortunately, that time Zoom didn't exist. We hadn't had a pandemic, for example, to make Zoom take off the way it has. But it was over the phone, and it was probably about a year or so before he died. That was the one and only time that I got to interview him, which was really, really special. But yeah, there's been so many cool things that have happened. It's hard to sort of distill and to remember them all. But certainly, how can you beat covering Tiger Woods winning the most unlikely of majors? Never mind it ended a drought. It was the circumstances of it. It was the venue. It's the fact that he beat such a stacked field chasing in behind him. It was unreal. It was genuinely unreal.
One quick question about Trump. Is it true that he cheats on the golf course? Because I know this is I've seen it so much online, on Twitter, in articles and stuff, that this guy cheats. And since you actually played with him, can you talk about that?
I didn't see any evidence of it. God is my witness. I didn't see any proof of that whatsoever. What I will say is, when was that? 2013, I think it might have been. He was sneaky good. Not the most elegant and gracious swing that you've ever seen in your life. It was definitely a bit of an old man swing, I guess you would say, quite stiff and laboured and short. But my God, he can get the ball out there. A sort of low penetrating ball flight, sneaky long, and his short game was as good as, as good as a low handicapper short game should be. Not entirely sure what his handicap is. I'm not sure anybody knows what his handicap is. He might be preserving a very low index or a high index, don't know. But he was an impressive player. And I can't rewrite history. I mean, we all know all the stuff that's happened since, and we've all got our own thoughts on it. I know I certainly do. But I can't rewrite history. He was good company for those 9 holes, and certainly the dinner the night before as well. He was in good form.
Was it just the two of you out there, or was it you were out there with like other members?
There was one other in our group, and we had caddies as well. So probably 6 of us on the course. But the course was really quiet that day, so there was nobody else about. I think they basically emptied it to make sure that it was just us. But I do remember, actually, now that I think about it, there was this funny incident on the par 3 13th in Aberdeen, and drinks cart had come out, obviously summoned, out you go, make sure that you catch up with them there, because that'll be roughly halfway. And Trump goes over to the cart, opens up one side, and he's like, I can't remember what drink he was after, but he's like, do you not have any such and such? And it wasn't in that side. He goes around the other side of the cart, and it's empty. So the cart is half full. Oh my God, he was not pleased. He was so annoyed, and sent the poor guy in the cart back into the clubhouse to fill up the other half. Insisting, don't ever come back out onto the golf course with a half full cart. And you know what? I actually get it. It's that sort of attention to detail that separates people like him from people like me, I suppose. That's why he gets to put has gone as far as he has, because he sweats the small stuff like that. Is it an over the top reaction? Personally, I think it was, but I do understand it. But it was it certainly made putting out in the 13th green a little bit more awkward. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, like, Bruno, if you've been able to play any of his courses. Like, I got a chance to play Doral probably about 10 years ago as well, and what an immaculate golf course. Like, the facilities, everything is just, no stone is left unturned, right? Like, they think about everything there. And so I can see how he's been so successful in this game, kind of building.
Well, one thing he doesn't do is build bad golf courses, does he? I mean, say what you like about the guy and his politics and the things that he's got up to, and January 6th and all that sort of stuff. As it relates specifically to golf, okay, if we can just be tunnel vision about it for a sec, he makes sensational golf properties because he understands the game. The work that they've done at Turnberry, for example, is spectacular. I mean, they've completely transformed that golf course and hotel. It's a shame that it won't get to host Open Championships, major championships, for as long as his name is on the hotel, but it doesn't deflect from the fact that the work there is off the charts good.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I have not played Turnberry, but because the prices are ridiculous. Let's just be real. But one day, yeah.
Worth it.
So Michael, you're also a very successful author. I want to talk about a book you wrote about London Marathon. So it's called Running the Smoke. You mentioned that it is actually the greatest event like in the world. So I want to know why that that is the statement you made about the London Marathon. But also, what did you kind of learn from that experience that has made you a better writer today?
Yeah, so in terms of why is it the greatest event on the planet? So I've run it twice, and the first time I ran it, or was it the second time? I forget, but certainly one of the occasions that I ran it, you had in the same race, obviously running at a different pace, but in the exact same event as me, you had Eliud Kipchoge, who's the world marathon record holder. He's the first and only person to have run a marathon under 2 hours. Never mind the controlled conditions, he did it, he ran it in that time. You also had Mo Farah, who is a British long distance running legend. You've all the greats of the sport taking part at the same time as you've got all these slower runners, fun runners, charity runners like me. And you're going through the streets of one of the most special cities on the planet. I mean, London is spectacular. You go past all of its main landmarks, and which is great. But there's this vibe and this atmosphere that is just so unique. It's entirely unique. There's nothing else like it. It's benevolent, it's fun, complete strangers willing you on, determined to see you do your best. You're never going to see them again. You're certainly not going to remember them. They're not going to recognize you. But for the split second that you run past them, they are cheering you. They're shouting your name if you've got it on your vest and willing you to do well. The human conditions change so much over the last. It feels like since the dawn of social media, it feels like we've all become a bit more pessimistic, cynical, negative, predisposed to toxicity. The world's certainly louder and noisier than it's ever been, right? London Marathon is the antithesis of that. So when you combine all those factors, you're running on equal terms, albeit slower, with the best in the sport, in a stunning city, going past all of its major landmarks, and you have the opportunity to raise money and experience this warmth. It's completely in a league of its own. It's hard to find the words to describe just how great a day it is. It's horrible at the same time. You're sore by 20 miles in when you're in the worst part of London, where there's really nothing much to see. You just want a big hug from your mum, but it's still remarkably special. In terms of how's it made me a better writer, it's a good question. I don't really know, but I think it's made, when you write a book like that, and you have, certainly with Running the Smoke, it was 26 different people's accounts all of running the London Marathon. So I ghost wrote effectively 26 mini autobiographies. That made me pay a lot more attention to detail, because you've got, suddenly, from having to work within really tight word counts, 300-400 words to get your story and your point across, you've suddenly got 95 to 100,000 for the book. So you have to put in the detail and provide the context, and that means asking more probing questions to pull that detail out of your subject. That has definitely made me a much better journalist. It's made me a braver journalist. It's made me a more confident journalist. And I think just the opportunity, when you have those amount of words at your disposal, it gives you the opportunity to be more expressive as well, and to try saying things in a different way than you would if you were continuing to write the cat sat in the mat style pieces. So that was a life-changing experience writing that book, not just professionally but personally as well. You hear some of the accounts of the people who are in there. I think of a guy who survived the Rwandan genocide as a child. He then moved to London with his family, ended up homeless in the streets of London, got into running through a charity that took him off the streets, and then he ended up running the marathon past some of the streets that used to sleep rough on. It's just, I mean, that story still gives me chills. You've got a woman who survived the 7/7 terrorist attacks in London. She was on the same carriage on the underground train where a bomb was detonated. I mean, she was lucky to survive. Many people around about her didn't. you can't help but be affected and changed on a personal level hearing those stories. So yeah, I think it in some ways it's really easy to write about sport, isn't it? Because that's the toy box of the world. It's huge drives, great putts, incredible touchdowns, wonderful goals. But then when you get into the humanity of people's struggles, I think that can't help to make you better in every conceivable sense.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, you've done, just based on our short conversation here, you've done a lot of great things in your career so far, and you still have a long way to go. But thinking about all that, if you weren't a sports journalist, what profession do you think you would choose, and why?
You know what? I have given this a bit of thought recently. I don't know. I think it's maybe just as you sort of approach 40 and you start to think, okay. I don't know, but it feels like at 40 feels like a huge milestone, because it's like you hope it's not true, but you can't help but think that there's more behind you than there is in front of you. So you think, am I making the most of what's left? So you do think, well, if I had to stop and start again tomorrow, what would it be? And the one thing that keeps coming back up is a forensic psychologist. And I don't know why. I think it appeals to my sense of detail, and I think it also comes from the same place as the crux of journalism, and that is searching for the truth. Journalism at its best pulls the truth out of any story, whether it's solving a crime or reporting on injustice or reporting on Tiger Woods, whatever it might be. The hunt for truth is at the core of good journalism. And so I think that perhaps is part of it as far as forensic science goes. Besides anything else, it just looks so cool. I just, the idea that you can take a hair strand and whatever it might be, or a partial fingerprint, or a little bit of DNA, and bang, you've solved this big riddle. I love the idea of that, but I don't think it's going to happen for me.
It doesn't need to happen for you. It's a fun thing to think about. And I can see there would be parallels, right? Like definitely would be parallels between what you're doing now and that for sure.
Yeah, I think so.
So it's been a busy week in golf, obviously. I want to kind of turn to what's going on in Scotland, because arguably it's the biggest news of the week is what has gone on at the Old Course at St. Andrews with the Swilcan Bridge. They've created, I don't know if you haven't seen this yet, go check it out. They created a little patio in front of the Swilcan Bridge. I was lucky enough to attend the Open last summer, and it's amazing when you go there. You see the bridge right away. They drop you in, so you head in the front gates, and the bridge is right there. You can't miss it. It's iconic in so many ways, right? With all the photographs from Jack Nicklaus to Tiger Woods, anyone you can think of. It's one of the most iconic places in golf. And there has been a lot of support, but also a ton of pushback, right? Sir Nick Faldo had a lot of pushback. There was the Courier newspaper over there in Scotland said it would be like drawing a mustache on the Mona Lisa. And Michael, you yourself said that old Tom Morris will be rolling over in his grave looking at this patio. Please explain why.
Yeah, a little bit, Charles. I mean, I'm not Oda Mae Brown, so I've got no way of proving that. I can't connect with old Tom, clearly. But yeah, it's the thing about what they did with the patio. First of all, I think it's important to say it was just a mistake, right? I mean, mistakes happen. The people in charge of the Old Course, St Andrews Links Trust, they have nothing but the best intentions, and as far as the Old Course and the other 6 public courses they look after goes. They're very sympathetic to the land, they're very respectful, and they don't make any change lightly. With this, they identified that there was a lot of wear and tear around about the bridge, simply by virtue of the fact that so many people cross it. People come from all around the world, even if they're not golfers, to get their photo taken on that bridge. You use the word yourself, it is iconic. It's a bit like the Statue of Liberty. You don't need to know anything about it or why it's there or what it represents to have your photo taken with it and want to show it on Instagram. So it has that special symbolism, if you like. By virtue of that fact that so many people go over it, yes, the land leading into either side of the bridge got worn down. You know, it was in a little bit of disrepair. The team at St Andrews Links Trust said, well, we can't have that. You know, it doesn't look good. It's not premium, and this is a premium venue. This is a bucket list moment for people. They shouldn't be taking their photo where they've got that. That's just not a nice look. So they decided, right, what can we do to fix that? And they settled upon putting in this patio, if that's the right way of describing it. And yeah, as you say, the backlash was pretty huge. Golf Twitter did what golf Twitter does. You know, it got, I'll be honest, it got very hysterical very quickly and maybe a little bit over the top. But I think that just demonstrates the sense of connection and sense of possession almost that people have for the Swilcan Bridge. Certainly the affection that they have for it. Everybody feels like they own a little bit of St Andrews. You know, any golfer feels like they own a little bit of it. So when you do something as drastic as that, it's going to jar. The other thing that's important about that, though, is St Andrews is not Augusta National. And you could argue that Augusta National has ruined golf courses for everybody, because you see it 4 or 5 days a year and it is pristine, because they go out of their way to make it pristine for those 4 or 5 days a year. And then at the end of the tournament, closes its doors. You don't see it for 12 months. In between times, they're doing a lot of work. I mean, now thanks to the guys at Eureka Earth, based in Augusta, we're now seeing more drone footage of it, and you can see that that golf course dies. They make a point of killing it off, you know, out with the growing season to grow it back even better. So they're able to do all the stuff they do to lengthen the 13th hole, for example, build new tees, to change 11 and 15 last year, to tiger-proof like they did in the early part of the century. They can do all that behind closed doors, and the first that people get to see it is when they reopen those doors. St Andrews is public land, never mind a public golf course. They cannot hide the work that they do. So in this sense, they kind of had their homework marked mid-assignment, because people showed up and went, oh, what's that? They can't do it in private. They can't hide it from public view. So it was probably an F anyway. It was going to end up that way. But I do feel a little bit of sympathy for them in the sense that they didn't get the opportunity to show people this when it was done. It's like, okay, we've done all the work. This is our vision for it. Because I gather they wanted to take out the grouting around all the bricks and have turf grow up through it to give it a bit more of a natural aesthetic. They didn't get to that point because public opinion, the court of public opinion, wouldn't allow it. So I kind of think, you know, be careful what you wish for, people, because they're going to have to put something in there. They've identified a problem. A problem requires a solution. Their first choice has had to be abandoned. What does the second, third, fourth choice look like? You know, so it's going to be interesting to see what they do with it. But they do have the best interests of that bit of land at heart. I have no doubt about it whatsoever.
And you already touched on this briefly, but the internet obviously did its thing with the Swilcan Bridge patio, and I've seen some great memes. I saw someone Photoshop a hot tub into the patio. I saw somebody else write RIP Swilcan Bridge patio, February 5th to February 7th, 2023. Is there any that you have seen that have stuck out to you?
Yeah, I saw one that somebody had photoshopped on top of the patio. They'd photoshopped the Millennium Falcon. It's like, you know, as if it had crash landed. I thought that was tremendous. Goodness. Somebody had Tiger Woods standing next to barbecue, passing a beer to John Daly, which I thought was, I could actually see that happening, to be honest.
Great.
Yeah, you know, there was a lot of fun that was had with it. And that's golf Twitter at its best. That was all good. That was all fun. But yeah, the sort of over the top reaction that, how could you do this, you terrible people? It's like, well, wait a minute. You know, they're not. They were just trying to do what they thought was best. But if golf Twitter wants to turn its attention to anything next, might I just suggest iron head covers or white belts or yellow balls? Deal with those problems, because clearly it works.
Oh, it definitely works, right? Like immediately St. Andrews was probably like, fuck, we really screwed this one up. And they took it down, already down. You know, I saw the photo of them digging it up. All the stones are gone now. Like, has the reaction over there been the same as kind of over here, right? Because it's very easy over here. You are still pretty disconnected from St. Andrews, right? It's across the pond. Like, has the reaction in Scotland been the same, where people and locals really have they been like, this is awful?
Yeah, one of the guys in our team actually lives in St Andrews, so he was devastated by it. He was like, "What have they done to my golf course?" So, as I say, like everyone feels connection and possession of it. Yeah, the reaction hasn't been great, to say the least. But you know what? I give the Links Trust a lot of credit, because it's very easy when you make a mistake to back yourself into a corner and to just, dig your heels in and say, no, we're sticking with this. They listened to what the public was saying, very aware that it is public land, and they held their hands up and said, yeah, okay, we made a mistake. And, as you say, it's now gone. All those stones have been lifted as of this morning. So they recognized the mistake, they fixed it, and I'm sure it won't happen again. So I give them a lot of credit for dealing with it so quickly. But yeah, I know a lot of people at St Andrews. I actually know the PR team at St Andrews Links Trust. On a personal level, I get on really well with them. They would have felt it the past few days. I'm sure their inboxes were full. And I just hope they have a quieter weekend this weekend, to be honest. Do nothing with stonework this weekend is my advice.
Oh man.
Yeah, so good. Just to touch on the DP World Tour and LIV and what's been going on with that, with the hearings in regards to LIV players being allowed to play on both the DP World Tour and LIV Golf. How significant are these hearings in your opinion, and how could the results change the landscape of golf in Europe?
Yeah, they're huge, these hearings. It's a shame in some ways that they're taking place behind closed doors. I absolutely understand why they are, but I think it would be good for people to hear the context of what both sides are saying. The DP World Tour is saying, we're just protecting ourselves, we're defending ourselves, and we're doing something for which there is a precedent. If you go and play in a competing event in our territory without a release, then we're well within our rights to impose sanctions. And equally, I understand what the 13 LIV players are saying, which is, yeah, but you weren't bothered when we went and played in the Asian Tour or the PGA Tour. This is just another tour. So it's going to come down to interpretation, really, isn't it? The three-person panel is going to hear both sides, and then they'll have to interpret and determine for themselves which way it's going to fall. Going forward, could this end up being a good thing for the DP World Tour potentially if the LIV appellants win? We all watched Rory versus Patrick Reed in Dubai a couple of weeks ago, and it was compelling. That Monday finish was as exciting a round of golf as I've ever seen, or certainly non-major round of golf that I've seen, because of the circumstances. You had two guys diametrically opposed who clearly aren't the best of friends. They're playing in competing circuits, and they're thrown together in that environment. I've not seen the viewing figures, but it has to have been a good thing for the DP World Tour to have that controversy. Going forward, if LIV doesn't manage to get world ranking points, but its players are allowed to play on the DP World Tour, it stands to reason you could see the likes of Dustin Johnson, Bryson DeChambeau, Patrick Reed taking up DP World Tour membership to play in those events to get those ranking points. So it might end up being a good thing for the DP World Tour if they lose it. If they win it, they'll tell you it's a good thing as well, because they've won. They've got their way. It's going to be fascinating, certainly in the context of the Ryder Cup as well, how that's impacted. It feels like this is the first really important juncture in this whole debate. There's been a lot of noise, a lot of speculation, a lot of controversy, and a lot of hot air, to be honest. But this is official business now, and it feels like, okay, we're getting somewhere towards a resolution, because that's what we want and need at this point. We've all had fun, we've all enjoyed the last year of shenanigans, but now we want to get some sort of resolution in terms of, okay, what's the roadmap for the future looking like? So PGA Tour's case will come down the line, but this is the first big one, so it's going to be interesting to see what the outcome is.
Yeah, and it's going to take a couple weeks, right? Like, this is not something that's going to be decided overnight. Do you think though, do you think that if this is decided, do you think a lot of those guys will go over and play DP World Tour events? Like, do you think they care about, their world golf ranking and they care about those points, or are they just, I mean, they obviously left for the money. Let's be real. Like, is that all they care about? Or do they really actually kind of want to play in these, sanctioned events?
I think they want to play in majors.
Yeah.
So there are going to be guys whose major exemptions are going to run out in a couple of years' time, and they're going to need world rankings to get them into it, aren't they? So I think that's the big lure for them. It just goes to show that no matter how much money you get offered, clearly playing for the 4 biggest events in the game is still the biggest driving factor. So I don't know for sure, but my hunch would be that if the DP World Tour is going to offer some kind of route towards world ranking points and majors, and it's going to do so unobstructed, then yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if those guys did play. There was talk last year that DJ was going to take up European Tour membership. Didn't happen at that point, but I could see why it certainly could happen going forward. But the other element in all this, of course, is the Asian Tour. The Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia has put a lot of money into the Asian Tour as well. It's now offering bigger purses, which of course is another incentive for not just LIV golfers, but all golfers to go and play there. So as it becomes richer and more players migrate towards its events, then it's going to catch up with the DP World Tour, at least to some degree. Strength of field then comes into play, world ranking points go up there as well. So the shakedown of all this is going to be absolutely fascinating. I didn't ever see us getting to this point, so I couldn't possibly hazard a guess as to what's next, but here we are. What a time to be alive.
Here we are, and it has shaken up things over here as well. And over here this week, all eyes are on Arizona, right? We've got WM Phoenix Open, which is happening. I've been to the event. It's insane, absolutely wild. It's one of the best events on tour, bar none.
Is it as busy as they make out? I mean, I know like 500,000 people go there, but when you're there, does it feel like there's 500,000 people kicking around?
Yes and no. So like we got there very early, and it's even changed now. We got there at like 4 or 5 in the morning to line up to get into 16, and we were lucky enough to get a front row seat into 16. And once you get in, it's really like being in a big venue. It's like being at a hockey game or basketball game or a footy game, right? Like you have washrooms in there, you have restaurants in there, you have everything you need that you would never need to leave inside 16. So once you're in, that's all you really feel is 16, right? When you're walking around the course, yes, it's busy, but like, I don't know, you've attended majors, I have as well. It's no busier than being at a major. Like you're still, you're fighting crowds, and yes, it feels busy, but it's not overwhelming. I think because so many people are stuffed into 16, and never mind all the people lined up to get into 16. But yeah, it doesn't feel like overly busy compared to other big events on tour, right? Obviously, if you go see a small event, most of them feel pretty small, but this one, it just feels like another big event on tour. And for anyone who hasn't been, go, because it's just so good. The weather's usually amazing. It's always on Super Bowl weekend, so you get that extra little buzz, right? This year, obviously, the Super Bowl is taking place in Arizona, so it's going to be even crazier. But yeah, it's a great event. They do a really good job with it, and it's just a lot of fun. Like it's so different than anything else you would experience on tour anywhere. But I want to get some predictions from you, Michael, because I want to know for you. We'll start with the WM Phoenix Open and what you think is going to kind of play out there this weekend, and give me a top 3, let's say, as well as a winner.
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of fancy Ricky Fowler this week. Former winner. He's lost there in a playoff. Likes the golf course, obviously, and he's had some good results recently. Listen, I think everybody likes Ricky Fowler, and it's been tough to see him struggle the way he's struggled over the past few years. But there has been signs of life. I like the work that he's done on his swing. He's obviously not as shallow and flat in the backswing now. I think he gets through the ball a lot better than he was previously, which is just a bit more, it creates a more consistent, more repeatable motion, which when you're struggling for consistency, well, let's get consistency in the swing at least, and then hopefully the results will follow. So you're seeing that, I think he was second in Zozo towards the start of the season. I think he was 11th last week at Pebble. So there are real signs of life for Ricky Fowler. So I'm hopeful that he'll come good this week. If it's not going to be this week, then God, I don't know when it's ever going to be. Beyond that, I mean, it's such a good field, isn't it? We're now starting to see the the elevated or designated events, whatever they're called now, they're really starting to take root. So as boring and as predictable as it sounds, it's so tough to see past somebody like John Ram, who has started this year in just absolutely spectacular form. I gather the greens at Scottsdale are really firm this week, and I think the way that Ram has been putting recently, that's going to, his consistency on the greens is going to be huge. So if he holds a few putts, look out. And then after that, geez, I don't know. I've got your top two there, to be honest. So
Yeah, I like it.
Rory as well. I mean, listen, Rory's world number one on merit. You know, John Ram possibly is the only one that's coming close to him, but Rory is what he did in Dubai. He'll have such good. He's riding good momentum, isn't he? First US start of the year. I don't know really what his record is in Phoenix if he's played it that much. I know he hasn't.
I think it's only his second time ever playing here.
Really?
Yeah, he doesn't normally attend this event. Like usually he'll start overseas, right? And then he'll come over usually for the Florida swing because he likes playing, you know, like Bay Hill and getting down and getting ready for the players essentially. But yeah, he doesn't often play Phoenix, but now that it's elevated, he's going there, and it's gonna be really interesting because you got Scotty Scheffler too, who a year ago had 0 PGA Tour wins, which is insane.
Crazy.
But yeah, it's a stacked field this week, man. All right, and then Super Bowl prediction. You're a Raiders fan. First off, tell us how that came about, and give us a non-biased pick who's winning the Super Bowl.
You're asking me to be non-biased when you've got the Chiefs playing. Jeez. There's going to be a heart and a head answer to this question. But certainly in terms of Raiders, why I was born in '84. My dad enjoyed, whilst I said earlier, you know, we weren't a sporty family. My dad did enjoy watching the NFL when it started on Channel 4 in the UK, sort of mid 80s. It was just something that got his imagination. Likewise, my older brother. So I kind of fell into that trap of, you know, knowing what first downs were long before I could spell most words. So born in '84, obviously I'm going to be a Raiders fan. So yeah, it's been a tough ride. It's not been an easy couple of years. I'm actually sad to see Derek Carr going because he was onto something with Bisaccia last year. I thought, you know, they seem to click, and it just hasn't worked with Daniels at all. My bigger concern is that somebody like Josh Adams is going to go as well. I think there's a bit of uncertainty about him. And who do you bring in? I mean, I'm hearing stuff like Jimmy G, and of the 3 49ers quarterbacks, he would definitely be the guy I'd go for last by some distance. So yeah, not easy being a Raiders fan. I just hope that next year we get a season that's not another 8-9 or 9-8, because that's just purgatory, man. Super Bowl weekend, I hate saying it, but I feel like the Chiefs just have the edge. You know, Mahomes is unbelievable. He's just such an electric talent. I don't like the guy especially, but Travis Kelce is an absolute specimen. I just think that they probably just sneak it. But you know what? The Eagles have had such a really, almost for the most part, a bit of a low-key season. But you look at their record in the regular season, it didn't feel like they were getting that much attention week to week. Certainly not over here. You know, there was a lot of talk about early doors, the Dolphins with a great start they got off to, and then the attention flicked to the Giants. Like, oh my God, they're in the postseason for the first time since, you know, the 1800s. And then it was just, it felt like the Eagles were just consistently good, and people only started to pay attention to them latterly. I mean, the Bills, of course, people were thinking, right, it's Josh Allen's year at last. Finally, the Bills are going to get the Super Bowl. The Eagles have just been this model of consistency, and Jalen Hurts is just a remarkable player. Yes, he's blessed with great receivers to throw to. You give someone Devonta Smith as a target, you're going to struggle not to make the most of that. But he is generational. I genuinely believe, for a guy that was second round pick, you know, this is only his third season, he's a generational talent. And it's a nice bit of synergy with Brady leaving the league, as it, you know, Hurts has got the opportunity to win his first ring. So I want the Eagles to win, but I strongly suspect, as much as it pains me, that it's going to be the Chiefs.
You know what? It seems like most people that I've talked to, they've kind of been split down the middle. Like half of the people I talk to say the Chiefs, the other half say the Eagles. I'm personally on the Eagles right now. That might change over the next 3 days or so, but yeah, at this point, it seems pretty close to a pick 'em, really.
Totally, yeah. There's not much between them, is there? I mean, they are two really good sides. I don't think this has been a great NFL season, if I'm being honest. You know, there's not been. I don't think this is the best Chiefs that we've seen over the last 5 years. I think we saw the best of them maybe 3-4 years ago when they had Tyreek Hill, for example, and you know he and Mahomes just had this telepathic understanding. So I don't think this is the best version of this Chiefs dynasty that we've seen. Likewise, I don't think this Eagles team can hold a candle to the Patriots at their best, for example. But they're the two teams that have been the most consistent over the piece, so they probably deserve to be there.
Yeah, 100%. Michael, thank you so much for your time. Quickly before you go, just let everyone know where we can follow you, where we can, come along in this journey with you. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I'm on Twitter at McEwan Golf, and I also work for Bunkered, which is at Bunkered Online, and we're bunkered.co.uk. And yeah, come along and check us out, see what we've got to say.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
You.
Honestly, it's been a huge pleasure, and we will be in touch with you soon. Go Chiefs,
Pleasure's
I guess.
Oh, no. It was going so well.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot, Michael.